you can see there a chart of Google. Yes, it's been a good year for the stock market, been a good year for tech, been a good year for Google. Google at $760. That is, again, every time this thing goes up today, it's a fresh high because yesterday it hit a fresh high. Google shares back above 700. What is going on over at the Googleplex? That's what we're going to talk about here this morning on the Markets Hub. Good morning, everyone. I'm Paul Vigna, glad to be here. Joined by Stephen Russolillo, my compatriot on Market Beat blog.
It's good to have you back, Paul. You were missed yesterday.
Well, it was only one day.
Yes, you were missed.
I don't really contribute a lot. I got to tell you, I do the show, and that's pretty much all right, let's talk about Google for a second.
Yeah.
You know, Apple's gotten all the attention for going over 600, but Google is even further ahead on a per share.
It's fascinating. Google hit a record high, as you mentioned yesterday, and it keeps going up today at a new record again today.
Right.
But this
you can
is
see
just
there. That's just going back to last fall. And you can see the sharp upswing since June. I mean, since when everything started going up, really.
It's been a very quiet rally for Google because, as you mentioned, Apple's gotten all the attention, but ever since June, this thing is up more than 30%. And you know, they had a good earnings report, their last earnings report, but really now it just seems like the company is clicking on all cylinders. Its search engine obviously that's the big kahuna is doing really well. And yesterday, Citigroup put out a note, their analyst Mark Mahaney, basically putting an $850 price target on Google. So saying that, okay, the stock is at all-time highs now, but it has room to run even higher. And so he points to the Motorola mobility deal that the company made a little while back, which actually drew a little bit of criticism, saying it was a big deal, they might have overpaid, what is it actually going to bring?
Why they're buying a phone company, all this other stuff.
But now he's saying in hindsight, this is actually a pretty good deal. The company, they've cut some costs, they've trimmed the staff a little bit, and really the gist of his argument is that, you know, Motorola is just, with all the patents that Motorola has, there's been a big patent war in the tech scene these days, so this deal doesn't look as bad as perhaps it did earlier, so that's a reason to be bullish on the stock.
Let's take a quick look. Here's something that Mahaney said there, and he's like, look, we're now back at the peak, and we believe Google shares can rise materially higher over the next 12 months. I mean, that is a bullish statement, to be sure.
That's as bullish as it gets, right? So, you know, Google is clicking right now on, no pun intended, but it's
it's really good, huh?
Cylinders. But I think also he points to in his note that perhaps competition from some other tech giants, whether it be Apple or Microsoft with its Bing search engine, and when he talks about Apple, he's talking about Siri on the iPhone. You know, these things aren't really going to have material impacts on Google's core search business. So he's not really worried about that, at least in the short term. Maybe longer term, that's a concern, but right now, though, it really isn't. So these are all sort of indicators that he's looking at that could propel the stock higher.
Search. I mean, obviously they run search, right? But I wish it just came to the top of my head. There's a note a few weeks ago talking about how Google is they're going to be they can take what basically was called a triple crown in search. That they're going to be #1 in, I think it's ad search, display search, and there was one other, maybe mobile. That they're taking display away from Facebook. That they're always the big one, but now they're big in just different aspects of search. And I think part of that is what's fueling this rise in the stocks.
Right, and you have to also look at Android. We can't forget about Android, especially when we talk about Google, because you know the iPhone gets a ton of publicity and the iPhone is doing great, but Android is capturing a huge amount of market share just within mobile phones right now. And so you know, the sort of low-cost type of mobile device, and so you know, Android has definitely become a big player in the mobile scene. And so right now, you know, things are looking good for Google, and it's fascinating because the stock, when it was last at 700, was way back in November 2007. So if you just look at the stock price, especially over a longer-term horizon, this stock went from,
and you can see it there. That is essentially the all-time chart for Google. That's a 10-year chart. They started trading in 04. They went public in 04. So you can see the sharp rise up to 07. Then they came down, and everything else came down, and they've been steadily climbing back there.
And a really significant drop during the financial crisis, down to around 250. So you have to think a company from 700 to 250, and now, as you mentioned, slowly marching higher. And over the last 3 months, it's been just a really sharp move.
Yeah, and I mean, you can see that chart too. I mean, it's still the growth rate for the stock itself it was going like this, and now it's kind of going like that. It's a little slower and steadier, like you point out.
Keep an eye on valuation. The company still, its PE ratio is still relatively in line with some of the other tech peers. It's in line with Microsoft and Cisco and some of the other ones, and not nearly as high as Facebook. So that's a whole
obviously all these guys are in competition with them with each other, and they're on different. But you look at Apple, they're doing great. Look at Google now, they're doing great. Like, there is enough room for all these companies to do well, you know, regardless of how the others are doing.
Exactly.
Even though they're in competition, they can still do well on their own. I think that's very interesting.
Absolutely. And so tech has been one of the big performers this year that's really driven the market back to, you know, its highest levels since 2007. And so a lot of people are pointing to tech will have to continue this rally if the broader market is also going to follow suit. So tech is a big player right now. We will see.
All right, Steve, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Talk to you in a few minutes.
Yes.